In the wake of the rise of Skywalker, a lot of folks are wondering if the grass would have been greener on the other side of the fence concerning the Colin Trevorrow script for episode 9. And while I don't really like a lot of Colin Trevorrow's work, it's worth going over what seemingly was going to be his version of episode 9, titled Duel of the Fates. Everything I've seen regarding the concept art from his unmade film looks beautiful, and it actually seems to play off The Last Jedi in a direct manner. And the most interesting part to this whole thing is that Colin Trevorrow's version of all of this was like this post-apocalypse kind of thing. So the first image I want to discuss out of the Colin Trevorrow version of episode 9 is of Force Ghost Luke intercepting Kylo Ren's red lightsaber, actually grabbing the beam. Ever since we heard Luke say, "See you around, kid," my own headcanon was playing out this myriad of ways that Luke would taunt Kylo from the beyond. And it seems to me like Colin Trevorrow had the same exact kind of idea I had in my head on how to go forward with Luke Skywalker in the final version of the Skywalker Saga. On the one hand, he was going to be challenging Kylo Ren throughout the story, trying to push him back towards the light, and then the other role Luke was going to serve was going to be as Rey's teacher. Luke would have served the role that Leia did in The Rise of Skywalker. For me, this makes more sense than what unfolded in The Rise of Skywalker. Now, Tross does have a moment where Luke physically catches the saber, but it was more of a wink-wink nod to the audience, and while I don't take it as a dig at The Last Jedi, Colin's version, at least in how I imagine he was using it, carried much more significance to the character of Luke and Kylo Ren. Luke is demonstrating how powerful he is in the Force to his nephew in this image, and it's in a way we've never seen before. And what's great about this imagery is that it feels subtle yet epic at the same time, and that's one of the best things about The Last Jedi. The next image is Poe and Rey piloting a razor sail through Bonadan waters, and they're being chased by the Knights of Ren in a ship that's called the Knife 9. I love the ship design of the Knife 9. It's fresh to the Star Wars aesthetic, and it has a bit of that First Order design merged with something that I would say looks like it's out of Battlestar Galactica, specifically Cylon. The skiff itself is really cool looking, and ultimately something like this made it into The Rise of Skywalker. However, a true sequence between the knights and our heroes would have been really amazing to see in the final film. Now, the next two images kind of go together. We see this image of an ancient Sith named Tor Valum. The rumored name of the planet that the Sith Lord is on is called Remnacor. And this guy was going to actually end up being the one who had trained Palpatine and perhaps Plagueis in the dark side of the Force. And if I had to pick between a returning Palpatine and this guy, I would have picked Tor Valum in order to at least give us some sort of creepy dark side alien masters, as well as expand upon Palpatine's backstory naturally. The Rise of Skywalker kind of just smacks you across the face with Palpatine. Duel of the Fates was going to have him as just a hologram giving instructions to Vader if he happened to be destroyed. To me, that's pretty neat. And I also just love how Tor Valum looks. It's super creepy, and it looks like he might be in some kind of watery pit, and he might also be enormous. So who knows? Looks pretty awesome. And then the next image that ties into the previous one honestly makes me a bit sad that we never even saw something like this happen. And sure, it's pure fan service, but fan service isn't bad when it serves a narrative purpose. Kylo Ren was going to be trained to go deeper into the dark side by Tor Valum, and during these trials, Kylo would have his own K-Vision scenario where he would face Darth Vader and lose. Knowing how excited I was when Vader destroyed rebels left and right in Rogue One, I think this sequence would have had my heart pounding. Plus, the defeat at the hands of Vader would really hammer home that overarching insecurity that Kylo Ren has, that his biggest fear is that he won't live up to the Vader reputation. The next image is of Rey on the First Order Star Destroyer. Her getup is straight up out of Return of the Jedi, with her all in black. However, the biggest change is Trevorrow's version has Rey wielding a double-bladed lightsaber, and I think this is a little bit more aligned with her style. I personally love this double-bladed blue lightsaber, and it harkens back to the Phantom Menace and also Return of the Jedi all at once. My one criticism is that had they really gone this route with the black getup, it might have been way too on the nose in its similarity to Return of the Jedi. This is the planet Bonadan, where Poe was to have once lived with his grandfather, and this is also where the Knights of Ren had ended up fighting Rey earlier that I mentioned. To me, this looks like Kijimi, but rather than it being cold and in the mountains, it's just some watery planet with a lot of tall structures, a lot of hustle and bustle going on. It feels extremely exotic and prequel-esque, and I can't say if this would have been more interesting, you know? It's just a location, it's just one image, but it does look beautiful. Now, like I had mentioned earlier with the image of Luke grabbing Kylo's lightsaber, he was also going to be training Rey in the ways of the Force. I think that this would have been an extremely beneficial way to tackle Rey's training in the final film. I hate to say it, but the limitation of Carrie's footage kind of botched Rey's training feeling real by any means for me personally. And I primarily mean this because there's only a montage. And seeing Luke going from hermit to now Jedi Master Teacher from beyond the grave would have been exciting. It's like the ultimate one-up from the Yoda moment in The Last Jedi. Again, it feels like it connects nicely in my mind to the themes of The Last Jedi. It really does feel like it picks up where that movie left off. And the scene of Luke in The Rise of Skywalker was part of a reshoot, so originally he wasn't even going to be part of the film in the way that he was. The next few images are breathtaking because of their sense of scale. It's all in Coruscant, which is sort of in ruins after it's in First Order occupation. Things like this are the things I wish we saw in the final film, and it makes sense if it was going to truly wrap up the 8 previous saga entries. Something like Coruscant could have aided in that endeavor. And there's not much more to the image of C-3PO and R2 besides that they're walking down some barren landscape of Coruscant, but it does remind me of when they were walking towards Jabba's palace in Return of the Jedi. And you can just make out an enormous First Order capital ship hovering above the city in the distance. And that brings us to our next image. This is what Coruscant would have looked like under the First Order occupation, and it's extremely amazing looking. That ship looks breathtaking, and it definitely has an Independence Day kind of vibe going on. I think showing how the First Order dominates systems would have been amazing, and it also seems like that's exactly what Colin wanted to show for the portions of his films that took place on Coruscant. This next image on Coruscant is of a Resistance traitor being executed by some sort of a lightsaber-esque guillotine, and it reminds me of what we saw from The Last Jedi. One of my favorite things about The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi were these like medieval undercurrents. We had armored knights, ancient lightsabers, First Order executioner troopers, they had those energy axes. It was all pretty extra, and I loved it. And it does look like that's Phasma on the left, and maybe she has a new helmet. So I imagine maybe in Colin's version of Episode 9, Phasma conveniently lived somehow, just being whatever, Star Wars. But yeah, I really love this guillotine kind of thing going on. The next image on Coruscant is of C-3PO embracing a no longer functioning R2, or at least that's what I originally thought it was until today when it was cleared up that it was just that R2 took a shot. But the little guy was very fried in the Battle of Coruscant, so the rumors were that this was going to be a very emotional moment from 3PO and it was going to dramatically affect Finn and Chewbacca, but in the end, R2 was gonna survive. I bet this next image pissed off a lot of folks who felt betrayed by the reduced role of Rose Tico, and I'm not going to pretend that her role wasn't severely underutilized in The Rise of Skywalker, and the excuses for why she was cut are almost worse than the fact that she was cut in the first place. But thankfully, in some alternative universe, Colin's movie was made, and for better or for worse, Rose Tico was front and center trying to activate a beacon to get a message out across the galaxy from Leia Organa, probably a message of hope. And what I think is so wild about this is that this exact plot point was something that a lot of us speculated about, that some special broadcast to galvanize the galaxy was going to happen. And it looks like Colin Trevorrow was in line with where a lot of our heads were at. And again, seeing Rose Tico playing a large part like this made me pretty happy. I mean, it's tough to see her just do nothing in The Rise of Skywalker. We also have an image of Princess Leia in a more traditional attire that makes us remember the original Star Wars film. And she is on Coruscant as well. And it looks like she is placing some kind of hologram or information into BB-8. Most likely, I imagine this is the message that Rose Tico would have been placing into the beacon to spread Leia's message across the galaxy. I think this is a little fan servicey for sure, and even The Rise of Skywalker used R2 in a manner like this, but I think I would have enjoyed this version more. Working alongside Rose was Finn, who was going to have an arc to lead an uprising of citizens against the First Order on Coruscant. We actually see a few of the concept art pieces of Finn and the locals uprising against the First Order, and truthfully, it's pretty awesome looking. We see that they have taken some old AT-ST walkers and retrofitted them to their own purposes to attack the First Order, and I love that they put war paint stuff all over them. It kind of harkens back slightly to the Battle of Kashyyyk in my mind, and in my head, seeing the citizens of Coruscant fighting the First Order Order with this old Imperial tech would have been pretty amazing. And I love how this gives Finn a much more significant role than chasing Rey around trying to tell her that he can use the Force. And yeah, these images of the Battle of Coruscant are really awesome and something I absolutely wish we had gotten to see on the big screen. And again, I get it, it's concept art, so a lot of times things like this don't make it to the final picture, but I digress. The final image we get of the Battle of Coruscant was jaw-dropping to me, and it's Hux, who is going to end up having a lightsaber collection, and then at the end of the entire battle, he was going to commit suicide over the loss. Now, this is definitely kind of an off-brand move for Hux in my opinion. However, depending on how the script played out and used the character of Hux, this could have been extremely compelling. And the visual of his death while the destruction of one of the First Order warships is underway is pretty amazing to look at. And we know that Hux was abused as a child at the hands of his father, so perhaps that could have been a little bit of a character angle on him in this version of Episode 9. The final few images are of Rey and Kylo, and they both take place in the planet of Mortis, which is also another planet a lot of us have been speculating about when it came to Ben and Rey being possible reincarnations of the son and daughter of Mortis. Now, Colin's script, from what I've seen, doesn't exactly go that route per se, but when Rey arrives to Mortis, apparently to find Kylo, she was going to face this gigantic beast. This definitely reminds me of a Rancor, and facing gigantic horrific beasts is something I definitely wish the sequel trilogy ventured into more. And I understand the trepidation of it becoming too creature feature or even just scary for kids, but I think that Star Wars is at its best when it gets this kind of weird, and I think this would have been a pretty wild sequence to watch. Lastly, we see Rey dueling against the newly masked Kylo Ren on Mortis. This was to take place near the end of the film, and unfortunately from what I have read and heard, there would have been no real Ben Solo redemption style thing. However, they would still be connected in a sense, as well as both being drawn to Mortis to finish this never-ending cycle between the dark and light. It was also said that before Ben Solo would die, that the light and dark would be stirring in both him and Rey, but honestly, who knows what the hell was going on. According to the script, Rey ultimately became the balance point between the light and dark when she defeated Kylo on Mortis. But again, some of that stuff is more rumor based on the concept art. Now, while there are tons of other leaked images of concept art, these are the ones that I wanted to talk about primarily because they depict a much different, more apocalyptic version of Episode 9, and to be honest, I don't think we needed a happy ending whatsoever for Episode 9. With that said, I'm glad that we got what we did with Ben Solo, but I also prefer a compelling and gripping story that also allows itself to step into the goof every now and then. That's fine, that's Star Wars, but it also needs to be handled with care, and I feel that now more than ever before. Either way, the Skywalker Saga is over and we were given what we were given. Now, what I hope is that Lucasfilm has learned that patience truly is the best approach with these movies. Don't stick to a release date if it compromises a $4 billion IP. Trust me, with the amount of money Disney makes each quarter, they can slow the hell down, nail down a compelling series of scripts even if it takes years, and then put those into production. We will wait. We waited a decade before. I think somewhere between Colin Trevorrow's version and JJ's version of Episode 9 was the perfect conclusion to the Skywalker Saga, a balance between fan service and something completely new. And with that said, I will be creating a video which most likely will be about a half hour or so long about an Episode 9 rewrite where we merge JJ and Colin's story into one functional narrative that will hopefully work well. And this is mostly for my own amusement and just for fun for you guys too. So I hope you have enjoyed today's video. I realize this was more of a podcast style video with you just staring at images, but hey, these are pretty beautiful images to stare at, and we're lucky and fortunate that we have been able to get a glimpse at the ideas that Colin Trevorrow had for his version of Episode 9. May the Force be with you. AT-AT is signing off.